Now can you hear me? That should probably be better. Sorry about that. Let me back up here and start all over again. Happy Saturday. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jules. My pronouns are he, him. I am a commercial food photographer and stylist and soon to be published cookbook author. And what we do here every single Saturday is we sit, we chat, we either plan our upcoming week, or you can journal, or you can do art, or you can just hang out, do whatever you want to do for an hour and a half. And yeah, we learn from each other. We discuss things like what we're watching, all sorts of that stuff. Say hi if you're in chat. If you're lurking, or don't, you can lurk. That's fine. Lots of people lurk. If you're watching this on replay later, hi. Thank you very much for doing that. Today, what I'm doing is hello, Anomic. Good, you can hear me now. So, what had happened? Normally, I check the input that my Yeti microphone is working. Today I'm running just a little bit behind schedule because I've been listening to some Will Wheaton interviews. And next thing I knew, I was like, oh, crud. I have a stream I'm supposed to be doing. Let's hurry up and get ready and do all the things. And I forgot to switch the input in my streaming software to go for my microphone. So, yeah, I have a lot I have to do. I have 2 weeks of backfilling my time blocks. But I'm not going to do that today. What I'm doing is I'm planning my week. I'm on holiday now officially for 2 weeks. I got so many exciting things to share as well. And so I'm just going to do some light planning of things I kind of want to do during my time off, but still leaving it really loosey-goosey, but I might go back and put in these time blocks because I'm behind. How are you doing, Anomic? What is new? What are you up to for today? Anything exciting happening? Once you have a chance, I need to tell everybody about a fun surprise that happened this week. What am I looking for? Oops, I knocked my mic. Shoot, sorry about that. So much noise. I'm in such a rush today. Yeah, so what are you up to? How was your week? What are your plans for today? And then I can tell you about my exciting thing that happened this week that kind of completely derailed me and my obsessive thinking took over. Actually was more of a hyperfixation, but for good reasons. I'm looking for days off. It's a holiday. It's days off. Days off from clients. Where are we? Right there. CG2. Where are we? I can't. Here we go, CG2. So, yeah, I'm on holiday. My book goes off to design while I'm on holiday. And my editor is doing all the fancy tagging that for the design department. There's it's a whole production, let me tell you. Okay, Anomic is saying they are good. They're just planning their next week out today and still watching Adam Ruins Everything. I will talk about what I'm watching once I'm done this story. So yeah, my copy edits are done. My copy editor got them back to my editor this past week. They're looking it over, doing all the tags, special meta tags that need to go in before it goes off to design, so that the design department can work on cover options and interior layout options and stuff like that. And this is all going to happen while I'm on holiday. And when I come back from holiday, my editor is actually going off for a week on holiday. So I actually have 3 weeks. It works works out too, where I like am disconnected from that project. But on Thursday, as I'm about to do my photography for my food days, but there may not be food days coming next week, any images on my Instagram, because on Thursday, and I wish I could share it. Thursday, I will get there. I'm sorry. I will get there. On Thursday, just shortly after lunchtime, I get an unexpected email from my editor saying, oops, I totally forgot that while you are on holiday, we are finishing up the design on so here, I'm going to back up here. It is so exciting. So backing up here, every quarter for some publishers, for my publisher, it's twice a year because they do a spring release and a fall release instead of like throughout the year. But twice a year, what publishing houses do is they release catalogs of their upcoming release season. So very, very shortly, and this catalog goes to book buyers, libraries, reviewers, media, all that other stuff. So people can be like, oh, I want to request that, or I want to make sure that's on stock, or whatever. And it helps determine how much they need to print and how warehousing. Like, it's a very, very important part of pre-sales. And I can't believe we're already at this stage. So, I knew when I was coming back from a holiday, I would be starting to interface with the marketing department to start talking about like book release party. I'm doing things like I want to have book plates printed, like just even because they're paying for some promotional physical material, but I want to also have book plates that I can sign and send to people who want to have signed copies of my book. And for a lot of reasons, I can't do that many in-person signings unless they're here on Vancouver Island, because traveling with my motorized chair is poses a lot of challenges. So I knew that was happening. But one part that we kind of like dropped off the radar was the copy, the marketing copy that goes in these catalogs for releases. And so I get an email on Thursday from my editor being like, oh, I totally forgot. And she's like, the copy has already been approved by marketing and by the publisher, which is a role, not the publishing house. It's already gone through all the works, but totally forgot that this is going out, like being designed, ready to be put out, like in the next couple months. The spring catalog, the catalog of all the book releases that are coming out in spring, and you still need to approve your copy. And I love my editor so much. She's like, this is what I wrote based off of like what is in your book and your answers in your, because there's this like huge marketing packet that we have to fill out when we, as part of the onboarding process. Is like 20 pages, and they ask you like so many questions about you and your book and why you wrote your book, like everything, so they can like really figure out the best possible way to market both you as the author and as your book. She's like, so I took the things that were in your marketing package and the stuff that was in your query letter and in your proposal, and I wrote this. And she's like, please, like, give me feedback. And if there's anything that made you vomit in your mouth, I'm really, really sorry. And I just love that. Like, she's like, please, like, I may have made you, like, I may have written something that was so antithetical to who you are. You may vomit in your mouth, but please just let me know. Now's the chance to catch it before anyone else sees it. And I just love my editor because she was just so, like, blunt about that part and spoke in my language. Anyways, it was amazing. So I get the copy, and it was, like, beyond anything I could ever write, because I'm so, I undersell myself. I will explain this in a bit too. So, but I love the copy, and I wish I could share it because it was great. But one of the things that I've been fixating on was in it. She describes my book as inviting, comprehensive, and accessible all at once. Yes, it is really funny-onomic. So, yeah. And I know my book is comprehensive because I'm autistic, and it's 54,000 words info dump, basically. So I knew it's comprehensive. Accessible, brain dumps can be accessible. I think my writing is accessible. But I wanted it to be inviting because my home's inviting and I'm inviting and people come over, and I wanted my book to have the feeling of them coming to my house and I'm feeding them and I'm telling them stories, interesting facts, whatever, about whatever. And I wanted my book to have that feeling. And so I've been hyperfixating since Thursday. Like, does she mean my book is actually inviting, or is she just saying that because part of my brand as a photographer, like part of my catchphrase for Polaris Creative is warm, inviting, and warm, comforting, and inviting is my, and I try and everything that I produce in my photography and both in this cookbook, I want it to be warm, comforting, and inviting, while it also is doing other things like informing and educating, and like there's a lot of decolonization of food and stuff in my book. And I'm just really, really hoping, I mean, she can't promise that the book's inviting, actually, without meaning it, because that would be disastrous marketing wise. All these people are like, whoa, I want to read this cookbook that is inviting and all these things, and then they read it and it's like, no, like totally not inviting and cold and completely cerebral, like instead of that. So that was really exciting, but I've been hyperfixating on it. It was a nice, pleasant surprise, but because, I mean, we are already marketing, like doing the marketing work for my book, and the catalog goes out really soon. And Anamik is saying she probably got that vibe from it. I'm hope that's what she can't lie about that, because that would be disastrous as far as reviews and like misleading the public to want to buy the book. And so Thursday afternoon, it just completely caught me off guard, because the copy that she wrote was nothing that I'd be able to write about my own work, because I really undersell myself for a lot of reasons. And if you're interested in that, over on the priority. Over on my website, disabledkitchenandgarden.ca, I wrote a post on Friday, because it had been 24 hours, and I was still hyperfixating on the word inviting, and just could not stop reading the letter, the copy, because it's just so good. And I'm like, oh my god, I have a book. It's real. I mean, this is actually happening. And so on my website, disabledkitchenandgarden.ca, I actually wrote on Friday a blog post about how being autistic and having and living with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, how that impacted, like the ways in which it impacted working on this book, the struggles that I had, and also, yeah, just how, like, I've talked about it on the stream briefly, about the OCD, how it decided to rear its ugly head, and I gave, it is sinking in, for real. I gave an example from, like, the very first time I have a clear memory of info dumping. Like, and I got in trouble for it at home, and I was actively discouraged from, like, there was this dichotomy growing up. I had to get straight A's and I had to be perfect because I'm twice exceptional. But when I did anything that, like, when I would talk about my autistic interest of the like info dumping and all that other stuff, I would get into a lot of trouble. I was bullied. I was name called by my parents. And so that that and my OCD and my autism and like just the rules of publishing and how they did not apply to this book, and how it's just exceptional, and I have a hard time with my exceptionalism just because of whole intersections of autism, imposter syndrome, and trauma. And so if you're interested in that, it's 2,000 words, but I think it's a quick read. And just talking about now that it's real, and this is actually happening, and nobody's can take it away from me now. I mean, the marketing copy, because this whole time I've been so worried that someone was going to come and take it away and be like, haha, it's a joke. No, nobody wants to hear you write about this. Nobody cares what you have to say. I mean, who do you think you are? Was like a common refrain that goes over my head over and over again through this whole process was, who do you think you are? And so like it's done. It is done. They are working on design soon. And like the only thing that now can stop this is more supply chain issues with paper and like right now there's a bunch of books that I know of and friends who are working on books whose launch dates keep being pushed back by months because, I mean, their books are printed, they've been shipped from the printer, but they're sitting in a cargo ship off the coast in the port because there's just like months long backlogs of being able to unpack the cargo ships and get them to the warehouse. And Nomic is saying being able to hear those positives about yourself from others can be hard to accept. Yeah, it can be hard to accept. I'm better at accepting it. When people compliment me in the past, I would deflect it. I would make jokes. I wouldn't know how to accept it. I'd be like, you're just lying. That's not real. And like all those things that those of us who grew up in different types of situations, it's a common experience. And I'm now good at accepting praise. Like I said in the post, I said, I know I am an amazing photographer. Of that, I have no doubt. And the reasons why I know I'm an amazing photographer is like for last weekend when I was away at the Island Good Market and I had my artwork hanging and people were walking by and seeing my artwork printed on canvas prints. Like a lot of them literally gasped and held their chests and commented on how like literally breathtaking and how my imagery makes them feel something like inside of them that they've never experienced before, especially when it comes to images of food. And I get to see that all the time when it comes to feedback on my visual art. And so I know I am a good, amazing photographer. Also, some other news I'm gonna share in a minute. Hopefully I don't forget as I go off on a tangent here. But when it comes to my writing work, I know I'm competent. I know I'm a competent writer because whenever I submit my writing, like I have over a decade of publishing experience for different outlets, and now a full book. Not just like my own personal blogs, but I write for F-Stoppers and I wrote for Wired magazine and all sorts of places. I will let you know how that went, how my market went in a bit, Anomic. But with my writing, I've never really had people comment about my writing on how it hit them emotionally, and I just get a lot of thank you for writing when I'm writing, which I guess is an emotional response, but not to the same extent. And so I know I'm competent. I don't know that I'm good. And hearing that, like, I know my writing serves a purpose. So I'm not, like, I need a lot of empirical feedback, qualitative, like, I'm very analytical. Um, and so it's taking a bit longer. Like, it's not just about self-doubt now when it comes to not being able to sing my own praises. It has to do with the type of information that I need so that I can make um, informed descriptors of my abilities. Otherwise, because my particular type of autisticness is such that I I need qualitative and quantitative feedback to be able to build like an idea of what is good or bad. And my taking English literature and all that other stuff never taught me those things, because I always hated, they never pointed out this is like what is actually good. And I think it's kind of difficult to explain, but but once people are able to say, like, this is why I love constructive criticism, is because it lets me know what is working and what isn't working. And I haven't had that constructive criticism when it comes to my written work. It's always just been accepted without any developmental notes, without any like big edits. And it's always been minor copy edit things, which to my brain translates as I'm a competent writer, but I don't know that I'm a good writer. And then for how Island Good Market went, it went okay. I didn't sell as much as I wanted to. Part of that was what I was worried about happened, is that there was no connectivity. There was no Wi-Fi at the place, and I had no cell service. So I had a lot of people who were interested in buying some of my bigger art pieces, but I had no way of processing those payments. And they didn't have that much, like, nobody walks around with cash anymore here. So I had a lot of people taking my business cards. I sold a good amount of my art postcards. I got a lot of exposure. I got a lot of nice feedback, and hopefully the people who wanted to buy my art and took my business card come back to my website later and are able to order it from my website and able to have it shipped to their house. So that's my hope. But yeah, it had there been an ability to process payments, I think it would have gone a lot differently, that's for sure. And then another thing that is happening that I'm really excited about now that I can finally talk about is, and for a lot of people, they're not gonna really care about this because they won't know who Andrew Scrivani is. So Andrew Scrivani is like the best of the best food photographer. And I'm like saying the digital payment process is so key nowadays. Yeah, absolutely. So Andrew Scrivani, world-class, internationally renowned food photographer. He has, as I've talked about, his new educational platform, the Andrew Scrivani Academy. And I'm going to be one of the teachers in his food photography academy. I'm going to be teaching both business courses and photography courses. And which is like a huge, and this is how I know that I'm an amazing photographer, because you don't get this type of job. You don't teach for Andrew Scrivani unless you're good. And like there's a certain, he has a brand and a standard that he needs to uphold. And the first course that I'm going to be teaching, it starts in mid-October, and it runs 8 weeks through to the end of December. It's called How to Cook a Book. And it's everything that food photographers aspiring cookbook authors and people who do both. Thank you, Anomik, for people who are watching this on replay. Anomik is congratulating me. And people who do both. Everything you need to know for the publishing journey, and every single week covers a specific aspect of the journey. In the beginning with an introduction with like everything that you need to know, the current landscape, the different avenues to publishing, and then like one class on how to do a query letter, what needs to be in it, another one on proposals, one on how to query, one on like the actual what to or contract negotiations, or the call, like questions to ask on the call, and then one on contract negotiations, and then one on the actual like publishing, so you sign with a publisher if you're lucky because you're so prepared and you've done everything I've told you to do, setting you up for success here. What to expect, what it looks like, your responsibilities, the publisher's responsibilities, timelines, how to make schedules, and to like for the shoots and the writing and all that other stuff. And then the last class of the course, I am bringing in some friends of mine who are agents, and as well as acquiring editors from some small presses to answer process questions. And it's like very, very clear that it is not a pitch session. There will be no like questions that ask about the viability of an idea will not be answered. If you want to query your idea, then you need to do it properly outside of this. But if you have more questions, specifically, because there's going to be part dedicated to how to spot predatory practices, both from publishers, from agents, what to look for, what is fair, what is even, whatever. So, like, those type of questions. So that is... And then when I was having my meeting with Andrew about like teaching for the academy, he's like, you can teach whatever. I mean, you have lots of experience. You're capable of that. I have absolutely no doubt. Which is amazing to hear from Andrew Scarani. And I still don't believe it's real. Just, again, because these things, I grew up in small town Canada, and these things do not happen to you if you grew up in small town Canada, especially because we do not have a celebrity culture here. And so to be having like these type of successes is just, especially since I was bullied as a kid for any of my creative passions. Like, I was supposed to be a scientist, and I mean, here you really want to screw up a kid. Let me tell you the trick. You be the teacher of a twice exceptional child with narcissistic parents, and you put in that child's report card that I'm going to be Prime Minister of Canada one day. And so it was basically decided when I was in grade 4, it was either grade 4 or grade 5 report card that this was. So I was either 9 or 10, and a teacher decided that I was going to be Prime Minister of Canada. So that was the expectation that I had to live up to. And it really, like, anything that I did not do that was not completely academic to put me into this position of world leadership, I was not living up to my potential. Any art, like, why are you wasting your time doing anything artsy? There's no money in art. There's no money in creativity. You are going to be a world leader. Or you're going to be, like, curing cancer or something like that. Like, that was what was expected of me. And so it's really a little bit... Anomik is saying that is just scary. Yeah, it was... I mean, it was difficult. It was difficult. For sure. Especially with the way that my autism my autistic internalizes stuff like that, and how rules work for me and stuff like it was a lot. And so yeah, it's so to be able to, like, here I am being a creative, and I am now teaching for an internationally renowned, like, some of Andrew's clients, and this isn't me bragging, but this is like to for people who are not familiar with Andrew, especially because, like, it's, I mean, sure, he was a Jeopardy answer a couple weeks ago, but it's what was I saying? Crap. Yeah, so yeah, his clients, some of them include like Disney and Apple and stuff like that, right? So you don't have clients like that's like the top. It's a lot of people, that's their dream. That's not my dream as a food photographer. I'm living my dream as a food photographer. I like working with local clients. I mean, I would like to work on a big brand, but I'm not sure I would want to work for, like, I mean, sure, Apple or Disney or whatever would pay me. I don't know, but that's not my dream, right? I'm happy doing what I'm happy. I'm happy teaching. I'm happy writing cookbooks. I'm happy working with my local farmers and local restaurants and local food economy in British Columbia, with the occasional outside of the province contract. I'm happy where I am. I'm fulfilled. I'm like starting in September. I am doing September, unless there's like delays in construction, I'm going to be working and creating a meal kit. I've talked about this before, that is geared specifically towards disabled people, that they will be able to use, creating programs to help ending food insecurity in the area. I'm pretty soon I'm going to be teaching, or like creating a home economics curriculum, because they don't teach cooking anymore in class. Where I grew up, like, one of the reasons why I am a cook and a chef and a cookbook author today is specifically because when I was in school, we, in grade 7 and 8, every single student had to take, like, we had core masters. So one quarter we would do sewing, another quarter we would do cooking, another quarter we would do woodwork, and another quarter we would do metalwork. And you had to do that. And then once you got to grade 9, then those things became electives, where you could choose either just cooking or sewing or woodwork or metalwork as an elective. But in grade 7 and 8, those courses were mandatory. And having those courses, like, I've always liked cooking. I was always fascinated by cooking. I was not allowed to help anyone out in the kitchen growing up. I watched, I was there, but we weren't allowed to help. And that's a whole other thing for lots of different reasons. Parts of it was cultural, parts of it is just like, oh, you're being a bother, get out from underfoot, sit over there in the corner and be quiet. But I like cooking is meditative for me. I like the exactness of it. The science, like, it's like a form of stimming for me. And now I'm saying they've had to cut so much out of school, woodworking, home ec, even learning cursive. Yeah. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do, and having that cut out, like, people think of food insecurity as being only an issue of money. And food insecurity also, like, most students are food insecure because they do not, like, once people go to university or college, as it's called in the United States, they immediately, even if they have money to order in, it's not about not being able to eat. If you do not know how to cook for yourself, that is considered being food insecure. If you have to rely on ordering in or going to restaurants to cook because you don't even have the basic skills, you are food insecure. And part of the rise in food insecurity has to do with the fact that people do not know how to cook. They don't know the very, very basics. Because nobody nobody is teaching them. Schools aren't teaching them. There's parents are like so jam-packing kids' schedules with extracurriculars that they're also ordering in. Like the family meal is starting to disappear. And then there are people who come from like, and then there are socioeconomical reasons as well, like growing up in poverty, growing up in dysfunctional homes, growing up in homes with addiction and mental health crises. All that other stuff leads to it, right? So it's just one of those things where I get to help create a program to help, and I'm also working on the food policy. Like every region has like a food policy now that gets a grant from the government to create, where the aim of that food policy is to help end food insecurity in a specific region, in which our regional districts are akin to counties in the United States. And so that's another thing that I get to help do, is work on that policy and being paid to work on it, right? So like I'm fulfilled. I get to use all my different skills, my mental health work, being disabled, being queer, being a photographer, working with food. Like I get to use all my skills in what I do. Manomic is saying that they were talking to some farmers at the market today, and they were saying that this fall there will be shortages everywhere. Eggs might be $12 or more a carton. Yeah, so we're experiencing that already here, and the reason why is summer. I mean, we still haven't had spring. It has crops are now 3 months behind schedule in the ground because of so much rain. And now, because of all the rain melting the snowpack, again, there are huge swaths of British Columbia that are currently flooding or have flood warnings. Multiple municipalities throughout the province are on evacuation alert because of flooding or the risk of flooding. Like I have a weekly, I subscribe to a vegetable box from my local farmers, so I can like develop recipes that are in season, to help with some of my work and to see what's available. Like this is what's available this time of year. So here's some recipes that like next year will be able to go in this food box thing that I'm creating with the Food Hub. But we're still only getting like leafy greens that people have thought like we're 3 months behind growing. They're predicting that's still going to be unseasonably wet and cold here in the Cowichan Valley throughout June and maybe into July. Normally, we're like experiencing mid-20s to mid to like high 20 temperatures Celsius for people listening to this. And we're still like lucky to break 20 degrees. We had one day this week that was 26, and then it went right back down to like 13 and rainy the next day. So it is, it's a challenge. And yeah, it's going to cause shortages. We're not so worried specifically here on the island about eggs or even BC, because we have the eggs that we get at the store most of them are from the island. Like there's a brand of milk and eggs called, and it's a bigger brand, but it's Island Farms. And so it's like a franchise of farms that are on the island. And we have more eggs than we know what to do with them. Chickens lay their eggs throughout the winter here because the weather is conducive to that. But other things, like the only thing that we won't have shortages here specifically is eggs and milk. Everything else, nothing's growing. There's like the drought and things that we import. It's like, and then war happening in Ukraine, and that wheat supply being cut off, like it's causing a famine in multiple countries in Africa, on the continent of Africa. So, I mean, it's stressful. Being working in food right now, especially after restaurants basically for the last 2 years were severely restricted in what they could do. I mean, like it's been difficult, and it's going to continue to be difficult, and it's part of the reasons why I'm so involved in creating a circular the work to create a circular economy on the island, so that we can hopefully weather these storms a little bit easier than if we weren't creating these circular economies. Yeah, meat will be really high too. Yeah, and it's already starting to be really high here. Yeah, it's like a family pack of chicken thighs are like $30 right now, which normally chicken's a pretty inexpensive meat. And that's only going to be getting higher. And there are some of us that I gotta stop doing that. Cannot, like, going to getting all your protein from plant-based is great and everything, but then you have to take iron supplements and B12 supplements and all this other stuff that is a barrier, financial barrier to a lot of people. Like, you can't just get all your protein from plant-based sources without also having to supplement elsewhere, even though it may be more environment. And then, like, again, it's the whole paradox. Okay, cool, let's move to more plant-based means to get our proteins and our fats, but those plant-based sources, I mean, we're 3 months behind the growing cycle for those plant-based sources. It's like it's a little more canning in your future. Yes. that's basically what it's going to be doing. One of the things that I'm going to be actually teaching and that we're implementing in the food hub is having a community canner, basically where people can come in and for a low fee, they can either jar their food themselves or they can drop it off, and for an extra fee, we will jar it for them. So that's another thing. It's like, I really want to be able to have this program using the production facilities at the food hub. And in exchange, then I have like free studio space and free workshop space, and I'm also like offering them some of my services in exchange for having access to be able to do all these things. So it's, yeah, I mean, while I'm teaching for Andrew Scrivani, and I just, if in the dedication for my book, it says, my book is dedicated to 6-year-old me and to the 6-year-old and everyone who was not allowed to live their authentic selves. And that is for people of color and racialized people, specifically brown and black people, who were teased and bullied, and Asian people too, teased and bullied for eating their culturally appropriate foods, and turned away from that part, felt shame for not being a white Western European culture. Queer people, disabled people who were neurodivergent and bullied and mocked for their interests. Because, like, I was that kid, number one. But also, and here I am, like, I am living the 6-year-old dream that I did not know I was dreaming. Like, I didn't even know I was allowed to dream it, because I was told I was going to be Prime Minister of Canada. I was not allowed to dream. I had to, my dream was what everyone told me I was supposed to like. And that's one of the things that is very, is a common source of trauma for autistic kids, regardless of how loving and accepting their parents are, is because we need really clear roadmaps for how to do things. We often take on interests, and it's part of masking, take on interests and do things that we actually don't enjoy, but we pretend like we try to enjoy them, and we take them on as our own interest because that is like what we are told people like, and we're like, okay, sure, I like this too. And it isn't until until we're adults and we're given space to actually figure out what it is that we really like, that we realize that's not, like, I don't like any of those things. And I never did. And it was just because someone told me, like, this is how it's supposed to work. And Namek is saying, we didn't eat certain foods in public because you might get comments. Yeah. That is, yeah, that, like, yeah. And I think about it often. There's a part in my book where I talk about a friend of mine. Yeah, you try to fit it, but it's not even more fitting in, because I didn't care about fitting in. I was happy being a nerd and a geek and just having my small group of friends. But it was just more like, so here's, like, I was in a parade, in the Victoria Day parade one year, walking the dogs with the SPCA, because I was volunteering with the SPCA. And I had to ask the head of the SPCA, how do you want me to walk? And I was literally asking, like, how am I supposed to walk? Like, what is my cadence? How am I supposed to carry my body? What am I? How do I interface and act with this world so in a normal human way? I actually have to narrate to myself while I'm doing things like walking or whatever, because there's no automation. I, like, asked a friend the other day, oh yeah, more talking about society in general. Okay, yeah, with the yes. So yes, more society in general, like how to navigate the world to look like I am human and not some alien weird creature. And I had white privilege and still have white privilege, right? So that was my and it's difficult. I'm like, I know what it's like to be othered and have my, like, not even allowed to be myself or have a culture. And like, there's a story that I tell in the introduction to my cookbook about my friend Rupa. Her parents were immigrants from Punjab. And she grew up in a very, very white part of Canada. And for a lot of different reasons, like, she rejected her foods of home and comfort and soul, and like are actually vital to health, because our genetic makeup evolves based off of our cultural foods. And that's like why as an example, black people are more prone to type 2 diabetes, is because a white Western diet is not conducive to the genetics of people who are who are black and are from black communities, either Jamaican or like wherever black dysphoриas exist. But I was like talking, like, when I wrote the book, I was very mindful of racial, because there's a lot of dishes that are like from non-white cultures, but it's like these are the food, and like just feeling like half of my culture I was able to enjoy, half of it I wasn't, and I get into that book. But what it was like I also wrote the book for people like my friend Rupa, who is now, she's in her 40s, and she is just now reconnecting with Punjabi food, and learning how to cook it, because to survive in white Canadian culture, she had to reject, like, and she's first, like, her parents immigrated to Canada in, I want to say, the early 70s, late 60s, somewhere around there. So not that long ago. But to survive whiteness, she had to completely reject the foods of her home. And she's now only now allowed, like, working through all of that. And it's weird to me because here's the thing about that. She had to reject her culture and her food in order to survive in white society. Well, us white people were like, ooh, I'm going to have some, like, exotic food today. And I'm using exotic because that's a gross word to use. But here I am, I'm enjoying this Indian food that's not my culture. I'm appropriating it. And while I am mocking the Punjabi immigrant for eating their food and coming to school smelling like the delicious, like, please tease somebody for the, but it's not like all Asians, that I mean, it's not just South Asians, but that's a very common Asian Canadian experience, is being mocked for either smelling like your Vietnamese home or your Chinese home or your Korean home or your Punjabi home or your Iranian home, right? Like that is a common Asian Canadian experience, is being teased for your food. And Anomik is saying that they feel like a certain age, you get to a point where you're like, whatever, I'm doing what I want. Yes. So there is this, it's really weird because you're taught about it growing up, that once you hit 40, you're going to lose all of your F's. I would normally say the word, I don't censor myself, but just in case there's a child listening somewhere in the background, they don't need to hear me. But you lose all your F's and you just live your best possible life. And it is true. It was once around 40, it happened maybe a little bit earlier, like late 30s, where I was like, you know what? F it. Like, this is who I am. And I really don't give two flying bleepity bleeps what you think about it, because I'm happy. And you either can get on board or get off. Like, you have everything to gain, and I have nothing to lose by you not being in my life. So that's that. But I'm hoping that, because there's a few things in my book where I'm basically say, like, this is everything that society is telling you about this is BS. And this is about embracing who you are, respecting your disabilities and your culture, and living it up. And let's give permission to the 6-year-old in all of us to be seen and to be celebrated for exactly who we are. And I'm just hoping in some ways parts of my book are cathartic for people, especially when I talk about how a lot of the foods that we have in North America came to North America as the result of violence and war and partition, and how white people have historically othered this food while also eating it with, like, as some fancy like that. Like, I every time I think of it, I get so angry. That the great courses, there's like this teacher, food cook, chef from some culinary school in California, who refers to spices, like regular everyday spices like cumin, as exotic. Cumin is not exotic. Cumin is it's a normal spice. Just because you white person may not typically cook with it does not make cumin exotic. And, like, it just makes me so angry. These are normal they're no different than us having pancakes for breakfast. Like, they're the exact same. Just because we may not have it does not make it, like, anyways, trying to, like, say F you to otherism and othering food and making it, like, these are, and here's the violence that you need to be aware of why you're enjoying it. And maybe now, instead of appropriating this dish, you will appreciate it and have respect for for the history behind it. And I have a cat who's climbing kind of like behind my computer and behind my mic. And so something might go tipping over. And if there's a loud crash and a bang, that's why. So what do I need? I mean, I haven't, what am I doing? I'm going to put breakfast here because I'm doing that for sure. One of the things that I'm wanting to do, over at least the first week, and I wanted to do it like last time, but I didn't get to. My hat. Sorry about that. Anamika's saying that they remember being a kid and people looking down on things like chitterlings. I don't know what that is. I'm gonna or is it pronounced shitterlings? Sorry, kid, that was not a swear, but CH in French, and I was primarily educated in French until grade 10. So CH is a sh sound, like an SH sound. So I don't know if that's a ch, like church, or a sh, like, okay. So I'm gonna have to look that up because this is a new word for me. Then when their mom sold the men affairs, she sold out to white people in less than 30 minutes. Yeah. Exactly. Like, that is the exact type of thing that I'm talking about. And now I am looking up this food. Because this is new. Chitterlings. Sometimes spelled chitlins. Oh, I've heard of chitlins. Are the small intestines of domestic animals, especially when cooked and eaten. They are usually made from pigs' intestines, and they may be filled with forcemeat to make sausages. Now, etymology, Middle English, but where, so this reminds me of, the Balkans or Spain, France, Latin American, Caribbean, Jamaica, yeah. This reminds me of chitlings, yeah, pig intestines. This reminds me of an episode on, High on the Hog, talking, and this totally, did you see how when I brought this out, my white balance completely changed on my camera? That's funny. Talking about, especially in African American, Black American cultures, yeah, soul food, talking about, like, High on the Hog, how absolutely no part, and this comes from, like, enslavedness, and I know you probably know this, I'm not talking to you, but this, yeah, and just how, because that was brought up in High on the Hog, how a lot of the foods, and I addressed it when there's a sweet potato hash recipe in my cookbook, and it was food given to slaves because it was considered throwaway food. Yes, exactly. And so I actually addressed that. I have hash, which is a very American dish and not Canadian. And because we do not have the same, I mean, there was enslavement of Black people in Canada, but it was different. I'm not saying it was better. It was different. And so we don't have the same influence of food from enslaved people alike in America. Our food cultures are different because of where our histories with colonialism and imperialism diverged. And so I just had to, like, I pointed out in the hash recipe, like, hash is one of those foods that now is very popular in America, but was born to feed enslaved people and indentured Irish slaves because it was cheap, high in energy, and was a really easy way, efficient way to keep enslaved people and indentured servants free. And then when hash houses first came up in America, like, they were poo-pooed. Like, if you were only Black people and people who were really, really poor would even dare to be seen in a hash house. And now suddenly, and then some rich white person decided that they liked hash, and all of a sudden hash houses rose to popularity and everybody in America started to enjoy hash. But that would, like, And so I talked about that history of how hash is directly tied to enslavement and all that. To be people like, yeah, you can enjoy your hash, but you need to know that this, like the history behind it, and the fact that you may think that, oh, look at me enjoying this fancy soul food. Well, you need to understand how it was used, specifically in enslaved people, for like, yeah, how it was used to repress people, and how America would not have this beloved dish if it were not for specifically black enslaved people in America. And I'm happy, like, I don't want to say happy is the word. I feel honored to be able to use my position as a white person to be able to be to my fellow white people, hey, you need to know this. And hopefully, I'm also, like, helping people, racialized people, to be seen for, and having their intergenerational trauma recognized and acknowledged, and not just constantly, just not another white person taking and profiting off of these histories of imperialism and colonialism. Anomik is saying, same thing with shrimp and grits. We see it elevated here in the United States now, but it was considered a poor enslaved people's food, especially in the low country of the U.S. Yeah. So I've never had grits. And collard greens is something as well that I am trying to wrap my head around. Like, okra is just now entering Canadian cooking and Canadian cookery. Is not something that grows here naturally, and again, because of our history, diverging histories when it comes to the enslavement of black people, it never made its part in Canadian cuisine like it is in American cuisine, especially in the South. And grits is something that, like, I want to go to the southern states in America to experience these food cultures and to do my own. Like, I'm so glad there's a season 2 for High on the Hog coming out, because it is a thing that I need to know more about, especially as somebody whose own, like, part of my family coming from Jewish backgrounds and coming from a culture where we've literally thousands of years, multiple times, people that I come from have had to pack up and move halfway across the world, bringing with them their food and their rituals around food, and in the face of genocide and in the face of a lot of things, our food has survived as Jewish people. Black people's food has survived despite insurmountable odds. And because of the parallels, I feel I need to learn more about that. And then Anomik is saying that at least the show, the connection of where it comes from, and try not to act like you came up. Exactly. Like, every single thing in my book, I wrote, like, pho. Like, there's this cookbook that came out some time ago that tried to say, like, pho tells the story of lovers between, like, a man or a king and or something like that. And that's not the case at all. Pho is because French people occupied Vietnam. Beef wasn't even a part of their diet, and the French people, like, demanded beef and a brothy soup. And pho was born because of colonialism. And pho came to America because of Vietnamese refugees, boat people. And so, like, it was important to me that I'm not going to, like, there's some food from, like, I was adopted into a Punjabi Sikh is the proper way of pronouncing Sikh household, and I Like, that is part of my food culture. Like, but I'm not a South Asian, and I did not experience the discrimination that they experience for eating the food that they taught me. Like, I was a member of the family, and so I was raised a few years of my life in that. So I have a connection to it, but it's still not mine because I still had white privilege as I was learning how to cook Punjabi food. Like, you are taught to cook it if you grew up in a Punjabi household. But I talk about the food, like all the dishes that are not specifically like, or even the Dukabor and Jewish dishes. Where I have connection to those I talk about the histories. Any dish that was not white Western European, I give a really a good snapshot of the origins of those dishes and how they made their way to our cuisines in North America. So yeah, that's the approach that I took to foods that I get to enjoy, thanks to racialized people and white, like Jewish people, and that religiously persecuted Dukabors that we have, because despite them being unwelcomed when they came to North America, and they still shared this integral part of their cultures with us and allow us to partake in it, because it's like sharing food is important. Like, you sit down over a meal, and that's where you do the difficult discussions. As a sidebar, does Canada do Pride Month? Yes, we do. It's really weird. So it is Pride Month here. And where I live in British Columbia, we have July as well. For some reason, like the provincial government parade happens in July. It doesn't happen in June. And so we have 2 months of Pride in British Columbia. The rest of Canada does it all in June. This Pride, though, I'm not participating in any Pride events for a few reasons. Pride is still not all that great unless you are Pride is still not all that great for trans people and disabled people and racialized people. And trans and disabled, it's not safe for me as a queer person. And then, okay, so I'm just going to preface this, like we all know, if you're queer, there is like an ongoing attempt to do a genocide on us. I'm just gonna, and so, you know, that U-Haul story that happened in Ohio. I mean, where they had to, like, the police had to truck away the fascists in the U-Haul. There are similar things have been happening like that in Canada this Pride. Canada's not immune to it. And, like, there was this past week alone, there were 7 Pride events that had to be canceled because of threats of either mass shootings or bombings. So it's been challenging. And then being married to an American, I mean, it's challenging. Being a queer person in 2022 is challenging on both sides of the border. So I'm lucky, though, to have, like, I am privileged in that, I mean, like, I'm one of the people that helped to ban conversion therapy in Canada. And we have those things on paper, but they're the programs, like, someone got upset with me on Twitter the other day because I was talking about that there's no real center politically in America. Like, it does suck, Anomic. and just talking about how like the Biden administration is better than Trump. However, what Biden is doing is what typically a conservative government, how a conservative government in Canada governs. And that's just so like Trudeau, by American standards, is like people think he's like really left. By Canadian standards, he is firmly in the center. He is not progressive, and he is firmly in the center because he has some policies that are like to the right of center and some policies that are left of center, and he's more inclined to helping out corporations over people. His policies are more pro capitalism, even though there's some socialism there, right? It's all about balance. Like I'm talking about from a political science point of view. Canada also as a country is very, very centrist. And I'm saying we as in like collective as a society, we like to say we are things for like pro human rights and all this other stuff. But when it comes to actually putting money behind programs that will actually make sure that people's human rights are respected and adhered to, and to help like lift marginalized people out of the margins, people get upset when their money goes towards those things. Oh, you're wasting my taxpayers' dollars, right? And that's a very centrist thing. And it's not the same as like progressive conservatives is a whole thing in Canada where it's like I'm all for I'm socially progressive but fiscally conservative. Well, you can't be socially progressive if you are starving unhoused people with your policies. Like those things are discongruent. It's not like to that same extreme. But it's still there, right? They're still not putting, like, they will put the bare minimum money towards programs. So the situation in Canada is that we have all these human rights, and yet, in the last year, because the money isn't going in as quickly, like, the programs are like, well, I'm going to put in, like, $2 billion for this thing, but it's going to be over 10 years. Right? So the money isn't getting there quick enough. And in the last year, I think the stats or something like hate crimes against trans people have risen by 800% in Canada. It may not be that extreme. Maybe it's like 400%, which is still bad. But it's like we're not immune, is what I'm saying. We don't worry to the same degree about mass shootings and stuff like that, just because like when the shooting in it was the black community shooting that happened, and the one in Texas. I'm sorry, I can't remember the communities right now, but when those two shootings happened back to back, the first thing that Canada did, like our response to that, was to make our gun laws even more stricter. Now we're banning all handguns, and magazines now can only have a capacity of 5 bullets. That's part of they're reinforcing, like they're making it so that any type of domestic violence, you lose your gun license. So all these things are being put in place in Canada. So that is where our privilege comes in. And it's not that we're better. It's just it's a thing that as a queer person, even though I cannot leave my house without experiencing violence in different ways, I don't have to worry as much about, but that's changing, right? Like it was a drag story time that was happening at some venue down in Victoria, and Sonomics saying they heard about the gun bans. A queer storytelling had to be closed down because of multiple phone calls to the venue saying that if you allow this drag story time to happen, we're going to come there and we're going to shoot you up, and a bunch of other things. So historically, I have not worried about going somewhere and having someone come and do an act of terrorism on my community. And this year, we are worried in Canada legitimately that we cannot participate in Pride for fear of acts of terrorism. Somebody tried mowing down a Pride parade the other day. Cars are being used increasingly in Canada as weapons against marginalized people. There was a Muslim family that was murdered last summer by a vehicle in an act of domestic terrorism. So it's happy Pride. I mean, yes, happy Pride. I mean, I'm queer and I'm proud of being queer but being queer in 2022, and it's just bizarre because like I had to come out very publicly about being trans because I was writing for Wired at the time in 2011. So 11 years on National Coming Out Day in October, I let the world know that I was trans and these are my pronouns and all that other stuff. So I've been out, like I'm an old queer. I mean, I'm a grandparent. My kids are grown. I mean, I'm not old. Like I've done, but and I got a lot of death threats, and I still do. But a lot of them are like removed from the scariest that ever happened to me. Okay, let's like steel yourself here. The scariest thing that ever happened to me is when I was doxxed, and there was chatter on 4chan, and my address was there because they somehow got my address. They were emailing my kids' school and the RCMP and threatening my children and threatening to show up to their schools. And when my address is there, like when the person says, oh my God, they live just down the street from me, and someone else replied, go to their house and kill it, like I was an it, and post pictures of their dead body. So I've experienced that degree of fear. But that is rare because I'm very good about making sure that my personal information about where I live and stuff isn't out there. I have a business address. Like I'm really good about that type of security. But I am more afraid of being trans, especially like when I married my partner, who's an American. Our marriage was not recognized in America because it's a same-sex marriage. And then, because, like, yeah. And then it's recognized, and now we have to worry again that it's not going to be recognized. And we pay taxes. Like, we have to discuss that. So, I mean, it's just really, every time I think about it, like, the fact that I have more anxiety about being a queer person in 2022 than I did in 2011. And I had come out like multiple times before that, but that was like I came out and stayed out in 2011. It's just a really sobering thought to me, and again, just experiencing that, and I have white privilege. I'm a queer disabled person, and I have white privilege, and so if this is what I'm experiencing as a white person, it's a million times worse for racialized queer people and disabled people. And Anomic is saying that they do not understand what other people's lives who never come into contact with you make you so stressed. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, it is. I could write a whole thesis. Okay, so Anomic's saying that's like the world is regressing. I could write a whole, like, I know, so my formal education my degree is in psychology. And like when I was growing up, I knew I was a boy when I was like 3 years old. Like I knew, we all knew. But like conversion therapy was the default, and it wasn't until the DSM-5 that trans men were even allowed to exist. And so, like, there's this big, huge panic right now, like, we're losing, like, all this panic. And it's not that there's more trans people, it's like autism, is that, finally, the criteria is recognizing what being trans actually is instead of trying to suppress. I mean, there's still suppressing happening in medical communities, but it's like the same thing in with autism. There are not more people who are autistic. It's just that we are better at recognizing autism and saying, yes, you are autistic. And that's the same thing with queer people. It's not that there's more queer people, because there's also, like, people say, oh my god, the kids are more bisexual or pan. Like, just queer in general. 33% of youth identify as some type of queer. It's not that there's more of them. I mean, even Kinsey, if you were to look at the Kinsey's research in the 50s, the numbers, like, there was something like 45% of men were somewhere in the queer category. Like, nearly half of men were gay to some, like, bisexual to gay. Sorry, I just hit the mic. I don't remember what the women's are, but I mean, and then the DSM 3 and 4 came out and kind of like, oh, we need to repress that because there's too many queer people, so let's unqueer the queers. And now some of that is being like, oh yeah, you know what? There have always been, like, at least 1/3 of the population is queer, is some form of queer. And we've always been here. It's just that now we're allowed to be, and that is, I mean, it happens all the time. Like, what was it? Someone was talking about, and I saw this on Twitter, and we're gonna have to, like, 9 minutes, so hopefully I can. They're talking about how, and I'm like, again, I'm going to be preaching the choir to black people. So this is not me talking to black people. This is me talking to my fellow white people. The thing that black people hear all the time about, like, slavery was in the past, get over it. Like, we don't owe you nothing, get over it. And we hear it all, like, all marginalized. This happened 1,000,000 years ago, get over it. And there was a woman who posted her rejection letter, and I don't remember from what college, what college it was from, but she had applied to the medical program, and this was like the late 60s, and she was denied admission specifically for, and I'm not going to say the word, and it's not like the really bad N-word, it's the somewhat bad, I mean, they're both bad, but it's the version of the N-word that ends with an O. They rejected her, and it's in her rejection letter that we do not accept, like they said, your grades are really good, and like, you probably could be a doctor, but we do not accept N people at this school. Sorry, like, or thank you for your time, or thank you for considering it, or something like that, right? That cordial answer. And that wasn't something, like, this person is still alive, did not become a doctor, because she literally could not become a doctor because she was the N-word. And so this is not something in the past, right? And it's really, so in some ways we are regressing. There has been a huge increase of hate crimes across all, like, racialized people, especially black and brown people, queer people, and disabled people have been experiencing increased rates of hate-motivated violence. And that is empirically sound. But other types, but it's only been, I mean, it's Trumperism is, I mean, that's what it boils down to. Electing Trump gave permission for these ideals that have always existed if your eyes were open and if you were aware of it. But Trump gave permission for people to be more overt about it. So, yeah, we're still dealing with repercussions, exactly. And so it's not that we are regressing, it's that people are now have been re-permissioned to be openly hateful instead of being systemically and institutionally discriminatory. Now people have been given permission once again to be openly hateful and violent towards marginalized people. And that's one of the things that makes me really, like, I'm really proud of highlighting how imperialism and colonialism has influenced food in North America. I'm really proud of that. I'm really happy to be in that position of privilege where I can do that, and instead of like being that person who sold an Asian cookbook stealing recipes from Asian people and passing them off as her own, like this is a recent thing, I am giving like actual educating my fellow white people about this is the violence that this is why you can enjoy this food. But I also have that little bit of apprehension of and I'm happy to bear it, and it would not be nearly as bad as if I was racialized. I would get it worse of like having woke being hurled at me as a slur, and how dare you bring social justice to your cookbook. You know, all that stuff that people like to spew these days, like even more so than a decade ago. And so that's the next little bit that we're working on. And my publisher is also very aware about how me being a queer person and a disabled person puts me at additional risk when it comes to promoting my book and going to public events and stuff like that. Like, we've had these discussions and we're coming up with strategies to protect me, and making sure that if I am not comfortable with something, if I am at all anxious, worried about my safety or my mental health, I just have to say the word, and like if I get to say no. And that was one of the things that they were like really clear about during the call for and during contract. Like, I get to say no at any point. Nope, I'm not doing this. They are not going to ever pressure me to do something that either I'm uncomfortable to do or puts me at risk of harm, whether that be mental harm or physical harm. And a lot of people do not get that with their publisher. They are told they are to promote their book no matter the consequences. And because I have that support from my publisher, and then again at home and with my friends, like I have a really good support network. I feel, even though there is that apprehension, I wouldn't call it anxiety, but it's because I'm not anxious, but it's like being aware, mindful of some of the challenges that are going to come. It is great of them, absolutely. Being aware of these potential things, it's going to be interesting, especially as the climate, especially as like people are just being more vocal about this hate and discrimination. So it's funny, I see my pain doctor at the pain clinic because they're going to see about blocking, like anesthetically blocking the nerve pain from my spinal cord tumor, which would be a miracle if they're able to do that. And I'm going to be like, hopefully, like not experiencing that pain anymore. But one of the questions they ask you is like, you have to rate like how many times you've been anxious or apprehensive during the past week, because they want to assess your mental health to see if there's anything that could be doing to distress you, because being balled up and like being clenched up can make physical pain worse. And so like one of the things, like, yeah, I have had some apprehension during the last week. I wouldn't say like they're not intrusive. I'm not thinking about it all the time. And I just can't wait for once that question that comes up when I talk with the anesthesiologist in July. Is like, so what has made you, like, why are you, well, like, I don't, maybe because my marriage may be made illegal and death threats. You know, I mean, like the normal things. Like, and if I were not experiencing apprehension because of those things, then that is when you need to be checking in on my mental health. But I'm like, yeah, I'm lucky that I have good supports, and I have a trauma therapist that, even though I don't see her regularly anymore, if something were to happen and I start to go back to having, like, living in a trauma response all the time and constantly being in freeze or fight mode, I have also a trauma therapist that I can be like, oh hey, I need some sessions because I'm not coping. I'm barely treading water. So like, I having that, and that again is a privilege. I absolutely have privilege there. Um, Allows me to move through this and be like, okay, yeah, sure, this is giving me a little bit of apprehension, but I got this. I can do this. And with that, it's already that time, and I talk so much about stuff. A thing that I want to say to everyone: if you haven't watched Heartstoppers yet on Netflix, do that. We just finished watching it last night, and it is an amazing show about queer youth and queer love. And it's an English show, and it's like teenagers and experiencing like your first romantic relationship as a queer, and like finding who, coming to terms with your sexuality, coming to terms with your gender identity. And it is just so very well done, and it has a happy ending. It's not showing queer people suffering, which is a nice change. So Heartstopper on Netflix is my recommendation of what people should be watching this week. Nanomic is not going to be here next week, as they have to pick family up from the airport. But they enjoyed the talk today, and hope to see you on the next one. Same with you, Anomic. I hope you have a great week. Enjoy your visit with your family. I may have a video out this week with my, hopefully, unhaul finally, now that I'm on my holiday. But if not, I'll see everybody next Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. British Daylight Time. Everybody have a great, fantastic week. Stay masked, stay healthy, stay safe, wash your hands. Until next week, bye.